What happens when you're publicly humiliated, called grandma, and fired in front of the entire company you helped build? Welcome to the channel. Most people would sue. Most people would lose. But this is not most people's story. If you believe that true methodical work always wins in the end, like this video, share it, and subscribe right now. And you must stay until the end. Because this isn't just a story about being fired. It's a story about a forgotten patent from 1998, a $200 million lie, and a single, perfectly timed email that waited until the exact moment of triumph. To burn the entire empire to the ground, let's begin. My CEO called me grandma and fired me in front of the whole company. He said I was too old to innovate. The irony? His entire $200 million flagship product, the one that made him a star, was running on my patent. A patent from 1998. He just forgot to check who owned it. You have to understand he wasn't a builder. He was a performance artist. His name was Bryce Calloway, 28 years old, and he looked exactly like what a committee of aging venture capitalists thinks a genius should look like. Expensive sneakers with an expensive suit, a $1,000 haircut that was engineered to look like he'd just rolled out of bed, and a vocabulary that consisted entirely of words like synergy, paradigm, and deep dive disruption. He was the wunderkind. The 30 under 30 cover boy, the new visionary CEO brought in by the board to revitalize the brand and take us public. And I was Susan Miller, 60 years old. Employee number 3. I wasn't a visionary. I was an architect. I didn't disrupt, I built. I was the one who wrote the first profitable line of code for this company, back when the office was a 2-car garage with a leaky roof. I was the one who designed the unglamorous, unsexy, brilliant data management tool that became our bedrock. The one quiet, reliable product that funded all of the company's flashy, expensive failures for the next 20 years. I was the one who mentored the kids who were now VPs, the ones who sat on the board that hired Bryce. I was the oracle, the one they came to when the servers crashed at 3 a.m., the only one who knew where all the digital bodies were buried, because I was the one who had buried them. This company wasn't my job. It was the closest thing I ever had to a child. My mistake, I see now, was believing that was enough. I am a builder. I am methodical. I am quiet. I believed, with a sort of quaint religious faith, that good work would always speak for itself. That loyalty was a two-way street. That contradiction, my quiet, head-down nature, is what made me a target. To a man like Bryce, quiet just means stupid. Old just means useless. He saw me, with my practical glasses on a chain around my neck, and he didn't see an architect. He saw a piece of obsolete furniture that needed to be cleared out. The execution was public, of course. It had to be. A man like Bryce needs an audience. It was the Oratech Innovate all-hands meeting. The entire company, all 500 of them, packed into the new glass and steel atrium. The air smelled of ozone and industrial carpet cleaner. Bryce was on stage, pacing like a caged panther, a headset mic brushing his lips. Behind him, on a screen the size of a small building, a logo glowed. Project Odin, his new flagship. His baby, he was on a riff. A real tear. All about future-proofing and paradigm shifts. To build the future, he yelled, and the microphone popped, making a few people wince. You have to be willing to... A few of the younger employees, mostly from marketing, cheered. Hooted even. I was in the 5th row. I was just watching. Analyzing. I'd seen this all before. The new hotshot. The big promises. My mind was already working on the back-end stabilization that Project Odin would inevitably need. I was thinking about server loads. Bryce continued, his voice dropping into that fake intimate tone that con artists use. But burning down the past? It isn't easy. It means we have to shed the parts that can't keep up. The parts that are too slow. And then he stopped. He stopped pacing. He looked out. Right at me. Susan Miller. Stand up. My first thought was that I had won a door prize. I stood up. My knees popped. The rustle of 500 people turning in their seats. And then the spotlight. a hot, white, invasive circle of light that pinned me to the floor. I could feel the blood rush to my face. Bryce smiled. It was all teeth. Susan has been with us for 35 years. He said the number like it was a disease. Wow, 35 years. Let's give her a hand. The applause was scattered, awkward, confused. I saw my former mentees, the VPs in the front row, studying their shoes. Susan, Bryce said, and his voice just dripped with this oily, theatrical pity. Susan is a perfect example of the old guard. We're moving to the cloud. We're moving to AI, and she's, well, he chuckled, she's still our legacy systems expert. A few people tittered. Nervous laughter. My blood didn't run cold. It just stopped. I felt numb. The sound in the room seemed to fade, replaced by the high-pitched whine of the microphone feeding back, blending with the rush of blood in my ears. 500 faces all blurred into one giant watching eye. We thank you for your service, Susan, he said like he was dismissing a waitress. But your time here is done. We're a company of innovators and frankly, he leaned in as if sharing a secret with all 500 of them. You're just silence, not just quiet. It was a vacuum. A thick, heavy, suffocating silence. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A system notification. My company email account had just been deactivated. It was done. Before I had even processed the words, I was already a ghost. I just stood there, frozen. I don't know for how long. Then, from the side aisle, a new figure. A security guard. Young. He couldn't have been more than 20. He wouldn't look me in the eye. Ma'am, he said, his voice low. I'll need your badge. I fumbled with the clasp. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from adrenaline. A cold surgical shock. He took the badge. Please come with me, ma'am. He walked me from the room. He didn't grab my arm. He didn't have to. The humiliation was its own leash. I walked past the front row, past the VPs I had taught to code. They were still studying their shoes. Past my colleagues, the ones I'd eaten lunch with for a decade. They suddenly found the seams on the carpet absolutely fascinating. No one made eye contact, and I walked past the giant gleaming banner for Project Odin. This massive world-changing thing. This future he was building. He walked me to my desk. The guard. He stood there, arms crossed, while I packed 35 years of my life into a single brown cardboard box. What is a life's work worth? My keyboard. A split ergonomic model. The letters A, S, and E were worn blank. I'd written millions of lines of code on that keyboard. The code that built this place. It went in the box. A potted plant. A little succulent. A gift from my team 10 years ago. It was still alive. It went in the box. A single framed photo of my old dog, Spot. He's been gone for 20 years. It went in the box. 35 years. A keyboard, a plant, and a dead dog. He erased me in 30 seconds. That's all that was left. The guard walked me through the lobby. Through the automatic glass doors. They hissed shut behind me. And I was on the curb. I stood there for a long time. The sun was bright. The box was heavy. I didn't cry. I began to calculate. Conventional justice, you see, is not just blind. It's complicit. It's a system designed to protect itself. And Bryce? Bryce was the system now. My first call when I got home to my empty, quiet house was to HR. The rep, a young woman named Jessica, I think, had been at the company for 6 months. She sounded very concerned. That practiced, careful HR department concern. Oh, Susan, that sounds awful. Let me see what the file says. I could hear her clicking. Ah, she said, her voice brightening. Yes, it says here your termination was part of the new strategic cultural realignment. Bryce is just driving a new high-energy culture. And you know this is an at-will employment state, so your employment can be terminated at any time, for any reason. Or no reason at all. It's all perfectly standard. I asked her, my voice very calm, if too old to innovate was a standard reason. Well, she said, and the carefulness was back. That's unfortunate phrasing. But it really just falls under cultural fit. We wish you the best in your future endeavors, Susan. Your Cobra packet will be in the mail. Click. My second call was to an employment lawyer. A man my age. He was sympathetic. He sounded tired. He listened to the whole story. He sighed, a deep, rattling sound. Susan, he said, it's ageism. It's blatant. It's a textbook case of age discrimination. I felt a small, foolish flicker of hope. So, I said, we file a suit. He sighed again. And then what? Can we prove it? It's your word against his. You say he said too old. He'll say he said skills aren't a fit. He'll have 5 VPs who were in the room, all with new stock options, who will swear they heard what he said. The company will say you were redundant. They'll say you lacked new-gen skills. They will pull your performance reviews, which are excellent. I'm sure. But they will find one line from 7 years ago about resistance to a new UI, and they will blow it up into a mountain. It will be your word, your savings, against a $10 billion company's legal department. It will take 3 years. It will drain your entire 401k. You will lose. He was right. The system had failed. The tech blogs, of course, picked up the story. Their headline, Aratech Cleans House, Trims Legacy Fat Under Visionary CEO Bryce Calloway. Legacy fat. That was me. The narrative was set. He was the future. I was the past. My wound wasn't just the firing. It was the public erasure. It was the realization that my entire worldview, that loyalty mattered, that work spoke for itself, was a child's fairy tale. The wound didn't make me angry. It made me cold. It burned away 35 years of sentimentality, of work family and company loyalty. It left behind a core of surgical steel. I no longer saw a company I had built. I saw assets. I saw liabilities, and I began, very, very slowly, to look for leverage. The turning point, the silver bullet, as my new lawyer would come to call it, came a week later. I was in my den, packing my life into boxes. Selling the house was the first logical step. Cut expenses. Become invisible. I was going through old project binders, deciding what to shred, what to keep. It was a miserable process, a post-mortem of a life. And then I found it, tucked between a server manual from 1995 and a stack of old tax returns, an old leather-bound binder. The label was printed on one of those old percussive label makers. Project Mjolnir 1998. I hadn't thought of Mjolnir in, a decade. It was a passion project, a data compression algorithm I had built on my own time, at home, on my own rig, back in '98. I was trying to solve an impossible problem, how to compress and stream massive data packets asynchronously without degradation. And I solved it. I opened the binder. Inside, printed on that old green and white bar paper, was the original source code. My code, my digital fingerprints. And tucked in the back sleeve. I'd forgotten it was even there. A stiff cream-colored envelope. Inside was the original gold-sealed certificate from the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Patent US 6XXXXXX, a method and apparatus for asynchronous data stream compression. I sat there on the floor of my dusty den, holding this piece of paper. I remembered vaguely licensing it to the company for a single, long-dead product back in the early 2000s, a one-time use. A product that was discontinued by 2009. I checked the original license agreement, stapled right behind the patent. The license had expired in 2010. My heart, it didn't race. It became heavy, a cold, dense, perfect sphere of ice in my chest. With a feeling of sick, dreadful calm, I walked to my computer. I went online. I bypassed the glossy marketing pages for Project Odin. I went straight to the public technical specifications. The white papers. The developer blogs. Bryce, in his arrogance, had published it all. He was proud of the revolutionary core tech. I read the specs. It wasn't like my algorithm. It was my algorithm. Line for line. The same architecture. The same unique, elegant, lazy solution to the compression problem. It was my signature. He hadn't just stolen my dignity. He hadn't just stolen my job. He had stolen my work. He didn't. He couldn't be that stupid. My God, though he was. He's built his entire $200 million flagship on my 1998 code. He's a thief? No, a thief is clever. A thief knows what he's stealing. He's just an arrogant, lazy, stupid boy who didn't do his homework. He has zero curiosity. His team of terrified, overworked 20-somethings, desperate to meet his impossible deadlines, must have just repurposed a legacy algorithm they found dormant in the company's servers. They found Mjolnir. And Bryce. Bryce, the innovator, just packaged it, gave it a cool Nordic name, and called it his own. He just assumed it was company property. He never asked who wrote it. He never checked the patent library. He never bothered to read the company's own history. The lawyer's words echoed in my head. You will lose? He was right. The system, the public system, would not give me justice for my firing. So I would become the system. I was not going to sue for wrongful termination. I was not going to sue for ageism. That was a game of emotions, a game I would lose. This was a game of architecture, a game of ownership. I would wait. Vengeance was no longer the path. I would let Bryce build his entire empire on my stolen land. I would let him raise his money. I would let him go on his road shows. I would let him put his face on the cover of magazines. And then at the precise moment of his greatest, most public, most irreversible triumph, I would hand him the bill. My next meeting was with a different lawyer. Not the tired, sympathetic employment lawyer. This was a patent litigator. A woman named Elias. She was notorious. Her office was not warm or comfortable. It was on the 50th floor, all glass and chrome, and it overlooked the entire city. She didn't offer me coffee. I sat down. I said nothing. I just slid the Mjolnir binder across the glass table. The patent certificate and the printed out tech specs for Project Odin. She read them. She didn't look up for 20 minutes. Then she looked at the Odin specs, then back at my patent, and she broke into a slow, cold, predatory smile. Ms. Miller, she said. Her voice was like gravel. They are 100% infringing. This is spectacular. It's a clean kill. We can file an injunction today. Shut them down by 5 o'clock. I looked at her. I looked out the window at the city. I could see the Oratech building from here. A glass and steel monument to arrogance. Shut them down? I said. My voice was very, very quiet. No, not yet. Elias raised an eyebrow. He's only raised $200 million, I said. I want him to raise $1 billion. I want him to bet the entire company on it. I want him to get the SEC involved for a public offering. I want him to tell the whole world under oath that I want him to get all his investors, all his new hires, all his ad campaigns, and tie them all in a neat little bow around Project Odin. I turned from the window and looked at her. Let him build it, I said. Let him build it all. The lawyer's smile vanished, replaced by a look of profound respect. When? She asked. You'll know, I said. For now, we just wait. And we watch. The first step was to vanish. I sold my house, the one I had lived in for 30 years. I sold my car. I sold my furniture. I liquidated everything that tied me to my old life. I moved into a small, furnished, one-bedroom apartment across town. Anonymous, beige carpet, thin walls, and I got a job. I got a part-time job at the university library, in the archives. 20 hours a week. It was perfect. It was the opposite of Aura Tech. It wasn't glass and steel. It was wood and paper. It wasn't loud. It was silent. It smelled of old books and floor wax and history. It was the perfect camouflage. Bryce, I'm sure, heard about it. If he even thought of me at all, which I doubt he did. He probably pictured me, Grandma Susan, shelving books, wearing my glasses on a chain, and he probably laughed. Good. Let him laugh. Let him think I was defeated. Let him think I was irrelevant, a relic put out to pasture in a dusty room full of other relics. Let him feel safe. He had no idea that the grandma he'd humiliated was now sitting in the quiet, surrounded by forgotten facts, with all the time in the world to plan. The quieter I became, I waited 6 months. 6 months of shelving books. 6 months of watching. Project Odin entered its final beta. Bryce was on a massive fundraising roadshow. His face was everywhere. Tech blogs, business magazines. His vision was the talk of the valley. He was promising investors a 10x return. He was promising a revolution. He was committing. He was locking himself in. It was time to set the hook. I made the call to Elias. Now, I said. It wasn't a lawsuit. Oh no. It was far too early for that. It was a piece of machinery. My lawyer filed an anonymous, interested third-party query with the USPTO, the Patent Office. It's a little-used public channel, just a question. A polite, technical, expert question, gently probing the novelty of Project Odin's core technology. The query didn't name me. It didn't accuse anyone of anything. It just, helpfully, pointed the examiners to a few obscure pre-existing patents, including, buried as the third item, U.S. patent 6XXXXXX. It was a fly in the ointment, a single grain of sand in the immaculate engine. The investors' due diligence teams, they would flag it. It wouldn't be enough to stop the funding, not with Bryce's charisma. But it would make them nervous. It would be a question on a spreadsheet, an item in an appendix. I knew Bryce. I knew his arrogance. He wouldn't investigate. He wouldn't see it as a legal threat. He would see it as an insult. He would just get angry. And louder. He called me Grandma. He fired me in front of 500 people in the atrium of the company I had built and told the world I was too old to innovate. He thought he was erasing me. He thought he was clearing out a piece of obsolete furniture. What he was really doing was giving me focus. He was burning away 35 years of sentimentality, leaving behind a core of surgical steel. My first attempts at conventional justice, of course, were failures. HR informed me my firing was a cultural realignment. A lawyer confirmed what I already knew. A lawsuit for ageism would be a long, expensive, and fruitless war against a $10 billion company. The system, it seemed, was designed to protect men like Bryce Calloway. So I decided to become the system. In a dusty box in my den, I found my life's work. Not the company, but a real piece of work. Project Mjolnir. A data compression patent from 1998. My patent. A patent whose license had expired over a decade ago. And as I read the technical specs for Bryce's new $200 million flagship, Project Odin, I felt a sickening, cold, and perfect calm descend upon me. He hadn't just built on my work. He had stolen it line for line. He was an arrogant child who had built his entire empire on my land, and he hadn't even bothered to check the deed. I liquidated my life. I sold my home. I vanished into a part-time job at a university library, a perfect piece of camouflage. And I waited. I watched him raise his money, his face plastered on magazines, the visionary building his revolution on my 1998 code. Then, when his roadshow was at its peak, I made my first move. Not a lawsuit, just a question. An anonymous query to the patent office. A single grain of sand in his perfect engine, just enough to make his investors nervous, just enough to make him angry. He took the bait, of course. His ego is as predictable as gravity. But that was just the hook. Now the real work began. It was time to stop waiting. It was time to start building the cage. My new life was a study in beige. My apartment was a furnished rental. The sofa was scratchy. The art on the walls was a series of identical, sun-bleached prints of seashells. I owned 3 plates, 2 forks, 1 knife. I had reduced my existence to its most essential components. My old life had been complex, filled with servers and teams and dependencies and 35 years of accumulated stuff. My new life was simple. It was monastic. I would wake before dawn. I would walk to the library, through the quiet, cold morning air. I would spend my required 4 hours in the archive, surrounded by the smell of old paper and microfilm. The archive was my sanctuary. It was a place where history was respected, where the past wasn't something to be cleared out, but something to be preserved, cataloged, and understood. My job was simple. I was digitizing old university correspondence from the 1920s. The work was methodical. It was precise. It required no innovation whatsoever. It was perfect. Bryce, I was sure, had forgotten I existed. Or, if he thought of me, it was with that dismissive, contemptuous pity. Grandma Susan, shuffling papers in a basement, irrelevant. He had no idea that I was spending my afternoons in that same quiet archive, using the university's high-speed fiber optic connection to study him. I wasn't just a librarian, I was an architect, and I was now applying 35 years of systems analysis experience to a new project, the complete and total deconstruction of Oratech. I read their investor packets. I followed their SEC filings. I read every fawning interview, every tech blog, every developer forum post about Project Odin. And I learned the USPTO query had done its job. I saw the ripple effects in the financial news. A new round of funding was delayed. Not canceled, just delayed. A few pointed questions were being asked in investor forums. The FUD, as Bryce would call it, was beginning to stick. I knew my target. I knew his ego. He would see this not as a legal problem to be solved, but as a public relations problem to be crushed. He would overreact, and I needed a record of that overreaction. It was time for the second move. The logic bomb. I didn't go to Elias. This wasn't a legal move. This was an internal one. I went to a public post office 20 miles from my apartment in a different city. I wore a simple gray coat, a hat, and a pair of non-prescription glasses. I bought a single stamp, a single manila envelope, and I mailed a letter. The letter was a masterpiece of corporate politeness. It was printed on high-quality resume paper. The tone was not angry. It was concerned. It was allegedly from a long-term concerned shareholder. I wrote it in the voice of one of them, stiff, bureaucratic, filled with their own jargon. To the members of the board, it began, I am writing to express my profound confidence in the new strategic direction under Mr. Calloway's leadership. Project Odin is without a doubt a revolutionary step forward. You must always validate their ego before you stick the knife in. However, I continued, in the interest of our collective fiduciary duty and in preparation for a successful public offering, I feel compelled to raise a minor but potentially significant discrepancy that has come to my attention via public USPTO filings. I didn't accuse. I didn't threaten. I questioned. I gently referenced the public query. I cited the patent number, my patent number, without ever claiming ownership. I simply asked if the board was 100% confident that all pre-existing IP, specifically legacy algorithms from the 1998-2005 era, had been fully licensed or remediated. I ended the letter with a bootlicking flourish. I am sure this is simply an administrative oversight, and I raise it only to ensure that our public S1 filing is beyond reproach. Thank you for your time. I sealed the envelope. I dropped it in the blue metal box. It was done. I had just very politely asked the CFO and the board if they had perhaps committed massive multi-million-dollar patent fraud. I didn't have to prove they were guilty. I just had to force them to investigate. And in investigating, they would be forced by their own rules to lie. Now I needed to see the explosion. I needed an asset. An internal asset. This was the hardest part. It was the only part of the plan that relied on human emotion. On trust. And trust was a currency I no longer dealt in. But I knew one person. His name was Mark. Mark was, like me, he was an original. He was an IT systems administrator. Employee number 7. He had been there for 30 years. He was the one who kept the physical servers running. The man who actually crawled under the floor panels and ran the cables. While Bryce was on stage talking about the cloud, Mark was in a sub-basement somewhere, replacing a faulty power supply, keeping the actual lights on. He was quiet. He wore flannel shirts. He had a magnificent graying beard that always smelled faintly of solder and coffee. He hated Bryce. He didn't just dislike him. He hated him, with the deep biblical hatred only a true builder can have for a charismatic fraud. He had seen Bryce treat the IT staff like servants. He had seen his budget cut, his team of experienced technicians replaced with cheap young contractors, all while the marketing department got a new kombucha tap. And he had been one of the few people, one of the very few, who had emailed me after I was fired, a simple one-line email sent from a personal encrypted account. That was bullshit, Susan. I had never replied. Until now. I sent him a message. Mark, I need to talk to you. Not about that, about my old work. Are you free for coffee? My treat. He replied in 10 minutes. Your treat? You're unemployed. I'm buying. Thursday, 7 a.m., The Greasy Spoon. The Greasy Spoon. A diner 5 miles from the Oratech campus, where the real work had been done for 20 years, where the engineers went to escape the horrible corporate cafeteria. I was there at 6:45 a.m. I took a booth in the back, facing the door. He came in at 7:01. He looked older, tired. He slid into the booth and didn't say hello. He just motioned to the waitress. 2 black coffees. And the number 4? She'll have the same. He knew my order. 35 years. The coffee came. He wrapped his big hands around the mug. So, he said, his voice a low rumble. The archive. Suits you. It's quiet, I said. We sat in silence for a moment. He took a long, loud sip of coffee. You didn't ask me here to talk about the library, Susan. I looked at him. I had rehearsed this. I had a speech prepared, all about legacy and protecting our work and the history of the company. I threw it all away. He humiliated me, Mark. Mark's eyes met mine. They were steady. He nodded once. He did. He built Odin. On Mjolnir. Mark's face didn't change. He just nodded again. I know. You know? Susan, he said, taking another sip. I'm the one who pulled it from the deep archive server for them. Bryce's new VP of engineering, that kid came to me, said they were looking for legacy compression algos. I told him that's Mjolnir. That's Susan's. The license is dead. I told him that to his face. I just stared at him. What did he say? I asked. My voice was a whisper, Mark. He laughed. He said, don't worry about it, old-timer. It's all just company property now. We'll just refactor it. Then he told me to go reboot the mail server. I felt a cold, clean wave of rage. Pure. Distilled. He knew, they knew. They knew, and they did it anyway. Mark looked down at his mug. They're liars, Susan. They're lazy. They're not just thieves. They're bad thieves. I sent a letter, I said, my voice hardening, to the board, anonymously, pointing it out. It should have arrived yesterday. Mark's eyes lit up. A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face, hidden in his beard. Oh, he said. Oh, that's why the CFO's office submitted an urgent high-priority ticket for the legal department's video conferencing bridge at 4 p.m. yesterday. They're having a meeting, I said. They're panicking, he corrected me. Mark, I said, leaning in. I don't need you to hack anything. I don't need you to break any laws. You are an IT administrator. You have access. You are invisible, just like me. I need to know what happens in those meetings. I need to know what they are saying. Mark stopped smiling. He looked at me, his expression deadly serious. Bryce is going to, I said. He's going to bully them into lying. He's going to force them to sign something to create a new piece of paper that covers up the old crime. And when he does, I need a copy. I hadn't realized I was holding my breath. Mark finished his coffee. He set the mug down with a heavy thud. He called you Grandma, Susan. He did. He called me old-timer. I know. Mark pushed himself out of the booth. He stood up, looming over the table. They're having an emergency all-hands meeting for VPs and above tomorrow at 9 a.m. in the main boardroom. He pulled a few dollars from his pocket and threw them on the table. I'll be rebooting the routers on that floor. It's routine maintenance. He looked down at me. Be careful, Susan. You too, Mark. He nodded. And he was gone. The next 48 hours were the longest of my life. I went to the library. I digitized letters from 1923. I went home. I ate soup from a can. I slept. I waited. I was completely, utterly powerless. I had placed my entire plan, my entire life, in the hands of one man. A good man, but a man who could be caught. A man who could be fired just as I was. Then, on Saturday morning, my encrypted email account pinged. One new message. From Mark. The subject line was blank. There was just one attachment, a zip file. My hand was shaking. I clicked. The file unzipped. There were 3 items inside. The first was a video file, boardroom 00900.mp4. The second was a PDF, Odin IP statement signed.pdf. The third was another PDF, it audit Q4 final.pdf. I opened the video file first. The video quality was okay. The camera was from an odd angle, the ceiling-mounted security camera in the corner of the boardroom, the one that covers the main door. The audio was clear, captured by the room's conference microphones. There they were. My old mentees, the VPs, the CFO, a nervous man named Harris, and Bryce. He was electric, but not with vision. With rage, I watched him pace. He was holding my letter. "Bud!" he screamed. He slammed the letter on the table. "This is bullshit!" It's fear, uncertainty, and doubt planted by our competitors to screw our roadshow. One of the VPs, a woman I had personally trained, spoke up. Her voice was trembling. "Bryce, the USPTO query? It seems specific. And this letter, shouldn't we just check? The IT audit." Bryce turned on her. It was animalistic. "Check?" He spat. "Check? We are days away from a 9-figure valuation, and you want to check? We don't check. We assert. We dominate. This is legacy whining, plain and simple. It's probably her." My heart stopped. "It's probably Susan," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. That grandma. She's probably living in a trailer park somewhere, furious, and she sent this. This is nothing. It is a gnat, and we are going to swat it." I watched as he bullied them, one by one. He threatened their stock options. He threatened their jobs. He told them, point blank, that if this rumor got out, the IPO was dead, and so were their careers. He pushed a single piece of paper to the center of the table. "This," he said, "is our answer. This is a statement of internal confidence. It says that we, the leadership of Oratech, have conducted a full review and certified that all IP for Project Odin is 100% proprietary, novel, and clean. It says this letter is a lie. We all sign it. It goes in the vault. And we never speak of this again." I watched, in cold, surgical silence, as every one of them, my mentees, the CFO, the people I had shared coffee with for decades, picked up the pen and signed the lie. I closed the video file. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I opened the second file. Odin EP statement signed.pdf. It was a high-resolution scan. There it was. The lie memorialized. The corporate letterhead. The triumphant false declaration. And all their signatures. Bryce's a self-important slash of ink. The VPs, small and nervous. The CFOs, barely legible. They had just committed federal securities fraud. For him, I opened the third file. It audit core final PDF. This was the masterpiece. This was the real internal audit, the one Mark had told me about. The one the VP of engineering had commissioned. I read it. It was dry. It was technical. And it was beautiful. It stated, in cold technical language, that the core of Project Odin, module odin.core.compression, was a direct refactor of the legacy algorithm Mjolnir. I discovered in the deep archive. It confirmed the code was identical. It confirmed the origin. And then, at the bottom was the addendum, signed by the VP of engineering, the kid who had laughed at Mark. Addendum. Mjolnir algorithm has been determined to be internal company property, refactored for modern cloud architecture. No IP conflict exists. They knew. They found it. They knew it was mine. They knew the license was dead. They chose to call it internal property to avoid the paperwork. To avoid the cost of licensing it from me, they had a choice. They could have called me the day they found it. They could have offered me $50,000 for a new license. $100,000. I probably would have taken it. I was a company woman, but they didn't. Because I was grandma. I was the past. I was a relic. Why pay a relic for something you can just take? I didn't feel anger. I felt the deep, profound, bottomless pity one feels for the terminally stupid. They had just handed me the gun, the bullets, and a signed confession. I backed up the files. 3 copies. One on a physical encrypted drive, which I placed in a new anonymous safe deposit box. One in a cloud storage account, registered under a fake name. And one I sent to Elias, my lawyer, with a single note. For the vault. Not for action. Not yet. Elias called me 30 minutes later. Her voice was strained. I had never heard her sound like this. "Susan," she said, this video, this signed statement, this isn't just patent infringement anymore. This is conspiracy. This is wire fraud. My God, this is criminal. We can go to the SEC. We can go to the Justice Department." "Not yet," I said. My voice was calm. "What do you mean, not yet?" She almost yelled. "They are going public. This is fraud. We can stop the IPO right now." "No," I said. "You will stop nothing. You will do nothing. We let them go public." There was a long, stunned silence on the other end of the line. "Susan," Elias said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Why?" I looked at the beige wall of my empty apartment. "Because," I said, "a patent lawsuit is worth, what, 10 million? 20? I'd spend 5 of that just on your fees. No, that's not what I want. He fired me publicly. He called me grandma. He called me legacy fat. He built his entire reputation, his entire future, on the public erasure of my past. I'm not going to sue him," I said. "I am going to erase him. I am going to let him have his triumph. I am going to let him ring that bell at the stock exchange. I am going to let him become a billionaire on paper. I am going to let him stand at the very pinnacle of his arrogance. And then, I am going to hand this package to the SEC. I am going to hand it to the Southern District of New York. And I am going to hand it to the press. I am not going to just take his money. I am going to take his company. I am going to take his reputation. I'm going to take his freedom. I am going to leave him with nothing but a wardrobe of expensive sneakers and a prison sentence." Elias just laughed. It was not a nice sound. It was a sharp, appreciative bark. "Okay, Susan," she said. "We wait. God help them. We wait." We hung up. The next 3 months were quiet. I went to the library. I digitized. I waited. And I watched. The IPO roadshow was a massive success. Bryce, having swatted the gnat, was back on his game. He was the golden boy. Investors were falling over themselves. The delayed funding was released. The IPO was oversubscribed by 400%. Bryce was unstoppable. The date was set. Friday, October 22nd. Oratech would list on the NASDAQ. Ticker symbol, Odin. Of course he named it Odin. The week before the IPO, he gave his final interview. It was the cover story. TechVision magazine. It was the usual fawning profile. Him in his sterile glass office. Him collaborating with his young team. Him talking about synergy and disruption and the future. And then the interviewer asked him about the cultural shift, about the legacy employees he had cleared out. I read the words on the screen. Bryce laughed. The article said he laughed. "Oh," he said. "You mean Grandma Susan? Look, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs." She was great in her day, but that day was, I don't know, 1998 or something. You have to clear out the past to build the future. You have to have a team that is hungry for the future, not a team that's... He just couldn't help himself. He just had to deliver the punchline. The final, perfect, damning piece of irony. I printed the article. I went to a frame shop. I had it professionally framed. I hung it on the wall of my beige apartment. It was the only decoration I owned. It was my trophy. It was my motivation. It was the final nail. The S-1 filing was public. The offering price was set. The company was in its SEC-mandated quiet period. This was it. The moment of maximum irreversible vulnerability. I sat at my cheap particle board desk. I looked at the framed article. I picked up the phone and dialed Elias. She picked up on the first ring. "Elias," I said. My voice was very calm. "The trap is locked. It's time to open the door." My old life was over, liquidated and packed into boxes. My new life was a study in beige, a sterile apartment, and a quiet, dusty job in a university archive. It was the perfect camouflage. He thought Grandma was shuffling papers, coasting into retirement. He had no idea the wounded analyst was using that library's high-speed connection to conduct a full systems analysis. On him, I watched him. I studied his arrogance. And I began to build the trap. My first move was a logic bomb, an anonymous, polite, concerned letter to the Oratech board, gently questioning the IP of Project Odin. I didn't accuse. I just forced them to investigate. And I knew to cover his own fraud, Bryce would be forced to lie. To prove this, I needed an asset. I went to Mark, employee number 7, a fellow original, a true builder who, like me, had been dismissed as an old-timer. He hated Bryce, and he had access. He didn't just agree to help. He revealed the truth. They knew Odin was my code. They knew the license was dead. And they took it anyway. Mark delivered the kill shot, a zip file containing 3 items. A video of Bryce bullying the VPs into silence, a scan of the internal IT audit proving they knew it was my code, and a PDF of the official fraudulent statement, signed by Bryce and the entire leadership team, certifying under oath that all IP was clean. They had just handed me a signed confession to federal securities fraud. My lawyer, Elias, was stunned. She saw a criminal case. She wanted to go to the Justice Department to stop the IPO. He was going to have his triumph. I would let him ring that bell. I would let him become a paper billionaire. I would let him stand on the absolute pinnacle of his arrogance, live on global television, because the fall from that height would not just be embarrassing. It would be total. It would be terminal. I watched his final fawning interview where he laughed and called me Grandma one last time, bragging that my day was in 1998. I framed the article. It was the final nail. The IPO was set. The S1 filing was public. The trap was locked. Friday, October 22nd, 9:28 a.m. I was not in my beige apartment. I was not in the library. I was in Elias's office, the one that overlooked the Oratech building. She had a bottle of champagne, a very, very expensive one, on her desk, unopened. And she had a pot of black coffee which was open. She poured me a cup. Her hand was perfectly steady. Mine was too. On a massive wall-mounted screen, we were watching the NASDAQ broadcast. There he was. Bryce. He was radiant. He was wearing a custom suit, but he still had the $1,000 sneakers. He was surrounded by the VPs, my old mentees, all of them grinning, their faces tight with a desperate, fraudulent joy. He was laughing. He was hugging people. He was the king of the world, the visionary, the man who had, as he'd promised, burned down the past. The anchorwoman's voice was bright and breathless. "It's the moment we've all been waiting for. Bryce Calloway, the 28-year-old visionary, is about to take Oratech public. This is the most anticipated tech IPO of the decade." 9:29:30 a.m. They handed him the button. The little glass pillar. He put his hand on it. He waved to the cameras. The countdown, 10, 9, 8. He was still smiling. He had no idea that at 9 a.m. sharp, Elias's associate from a secure anonymous server had hit send. 3 identical packages. 3 digital care packages. The first to the Securities and Exchange Commission, Division of Enforcement. Marked, urgent, active securities fraud in Odin IPO. See attached evidence. The second, to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. Marked, evidence, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, securities fraud, Oratech leadership. The third was the fastest. The third was the one that would break the sound barrier. It was sent to a single email address. The address of David Chen, a 2-time Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist at the Wall Street Journal. A man who loathed tech frauds more than anyone on Earth. 3, 2, 1. The bell rang. The stock ticker Odin appeared on the board. The opening trade was a monster. It was priced at $40. It opened at $72. An incredible pop! The anchor woman shouted over the noise. Aurotech is instantly up. Bryce Calloway is, as of this moment, one of the youngest self-made billionaires in history. His face was on the Jumbotron in Times Square. He was, for that one brief, shining, irreversible moment, victorious. Elias looked at me. She wasn't smiling. She was an analyst just like me. The SEC is slow, she said, sipping her coffee. They're methodical. They're librarians. The SDNY is slower. They're archaeologists. They're building a case. They have to be perfect, she nodded at the screen. But Chen is a predator. He's already read the attachments. He's verified the video. He's on the phone. I knew who Chen would call. Not Bryce, never the king. You call the weakest link. You call the man who controls the money. You call the man who signed his name on a lie and has the most to lose. You call the CFO. We watched Bryce preening for the camera. This isn't just a win for us, it's a win for innovation. It's proof that if you have a bold new vision. The anchor interrupted him. She was getting something in her earpiece. Her smile faltered. Mr. Calloway, one moment. We are just getting a report. Trading on Aurotech stock has been halted. Bryce blinked. What? No, that's a mistake. The demand is huge. We are confirming. Yes, the anchor said, her voice now cold, professional. NASDAQ has officially halted all trading in ticker Odin, pending material news. Stand by. Material news, Elias said, her voice a purr. That's a fun way to put it. He's trapped, I said. I hadn't realized I'd spoken aloud. What? Elias asked. He's on a live television set, I said, unable to look away from the screen. He's on the NASDAQ floor. He can't run. He can't hide in a boardroom. He can't call his lawyers. And then, at 10:02 a.m., the article dropped. The Wall Street Journal app on Elias's monitor chimed. The headline was simple. It was brutal. Aurotech IPO halted amid SEC probe. CEO, board accused of fraud, patent theft. The subheadline, leaked internal documents, video appear to show CEO Bryce Calloway. Knowingly used stolen patent, conspired to defraud investors, and the lead image, it was perfect. It was a side-by-side. On the left, Bryce, triumphant on the NASDAQ stage an hour ago. On the right, a scan of the 1998 patent certificate, with my name on it. We watched the chaos. The anchor woman, now holding her phone, looked at the camera, her face grim. We are reading the Wall Street Journal report now. It alleges that the core technology of Project Odin is based on a 1998 patent. She said my name. She said my name. The journal reports that Ms. Miller was terminated by Mr. Calloway in a public all-hands meeting 6 months ago for being, quote, too old to innovate. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It was a shaky, rattling sound. He didn't just fire me. He erased me. He called me legacy fat. And now, the entire financial world, was hearing my name. They were hearing the truth. They were seeing his lie, my work, and his motive, all in one sentence. It was perfect. He was gone. His moment of triumph had lasted 45 minutes. Now the system took over, my system. The SEC, seeing the public explosion, formalized the halt. The SDNY, now that the press had confirmed all the evidence they had, unsealed their warrants. A company, a $30 billion company, cannot exist when its entire premise is a lie. The IPO was voided. The trades were unwound. The underwriters pulled out. The investors, the venture capitalists who had backed him, the ones who had sat on the board and let him fire me, were wiped out. Aurotech as a legal financial entity ceased to exist by 3 p.m. I went home. To my beige apartment. I sat on my scratchy sofa. I turned on the evening news. And I watched. The same doors I had been escorted through, holding my cardboard box. Broken. He wasn't a visionary. He wasn't an innovator. He was just a thief. A lazy, arrogant, stupid thief. The VPs, they all turned. Every single one. They testified against him in exchange for deals. The CFO, Harris, was the first one to plead guilty. The kid, the VP of engineering who had stolen my code, he was sentenced to 3 years for conspiracy. And Bryce Calloway was found guilty on 12 counts of securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. The judge? She was a woman my age. At his sentencing, she read from a statement. I had a copy of the transcript. Mr. Calloway, she said, you did not just steal money. You stole a woman's life's work. You stole her dignity. And you did it all in the name of innovation. The arrogance on display here is, it is the judgment of this court that you are sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. I got my money, of course. The bankruptcy court, in dissolving the assets of Oratech, had one major creditor. Me, the holder of the patent that the entire company was built on. The VCs got nothing. The shareholders got nothing. I got the building. I got the servers. I got the office furniture. I got the kombucha taps. I sold it all. Except for one thing. I started a foundation, the Miller Foundation. We fund scholarships for women over 50 who want to re-enter the tech industry. We call them legacy innovators. He called me grandma. He said I was too old to innovate. He said my day was 1998. He was right. My day was 1998. He was a performance artist, all glass and steel and light. He was the future, but he forgot the first rule of architecture. It doesn't matter how beautiful your glass tower is. It doesn't matter how high it scrapes the sky. If the foundation is rotten, if the foundation is stolen, the whole thing. My name is Susan Miller, and I am a builder. I build things that last. In the end, it doesn't matter how beautiful the glass tower is. If the foundation is stolen, the whole thing will collapse. Bryce Calloway was a performance artist, but Susan Miller, she was an architect. Thank you for watching this incredible story unfold. If you found this takedown as satisfying as I did, please like this video. I have to ask, what was the single most satisfying moment for you? Was it the IPO halt on live TV? The perp walk in his expensive sneakers? Or the final 25-year sentence? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. For more stories of methodical planning and perfect justice, subscribe to the channel and make sure to hit that notification bell so you never miss a takedown. The easiest way to support the channel is just by sharing this video with one friend who would appreciate it. Until next time, plan your work and work your plan.